Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to be showing you a few records that you might be surprised to find in my collection. A couple are probably guilty pleasures, others I love unabashedly, but for the most part you might be like, huh, really Hollis? So please join me this week for records you might be surprised to find in my collection. Not too succinct. There was no better way to say that. Before we get rolling, I just want to thank my new mystery patron. Thank you, South Dew. I very much appreciate you becoming a gravedigger. If you're enjoying the content that I'm bringing you on a weekly basis and would like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. Up first, get the Knack. You know, I'm a punk rock guy, I'm a hip hop guy, I'm a reggae guy, I'm a synth pop guy, I'm a ska punk guy. But yes, I'm a power pop guy. And this is a sizzling power pop debut. Everything about my snarky attitude might lead you to believe that I would hate on this album, but that's simply not true. The killer breakthrough track, My Sharona, is pure power pop gold. And the rest of the tracks on this album, including Good Girls Don't, hit home with a similar impact. This LP has a beautiful gloss, as you would expect from any Mike Chapman-produced album. And Mike Chapman even returned to produce their second album, the very underrated But the Little Girls Understand. I got this as a kid at a flea market for $1, but I would have paid twice as much. If you're curious about their sophomore album, check out their cover of Ray Davies' Hard Way, originally made famous by the Kinks. And yes, that is the real Sharona on the cover. Can you believe he finally got to go out with her? Up next, Foghat Live. Yeah, I surprise myself sometimes. I picked up this puppy for $3 about 25 years ago, and it is a live delight. Foghat were one of the best live acts you could see in the 70s, as this 1977 disc proves. Check out Fool for the City, I Just Want to Make Love to You, and an outlandishly great version of Slow Ride. Just put on this live album, close your eyes, and you will imagine that you're out at the Moon Tower. You've just had a few beers, and a drunk girl is screaming at you to air raid. Watch out for that bad crowd you're running with. Don't think I haven't noticed. Dazed and Confused. What? Up next, The Hungry Years, Neil Sedaka. Yes, you heard me right. There's a track on this album called Bad Blood that I absolutely love. Neil wrote the song with his lyricist, Phil Cody, but he performs it as a duet with Elton John. Yes, that Elton John, of the sequined jackets and oversized glasses. And it was at the #1 slot for 3 weeks back in 1975 when this came out. At first it may seem like an odd pairing, but this was released on Rocket Records, which is a record company that was founded by Elton John and his lyricist, Bernie Taupin. Anyway, I wish I could say that it's the only good song on here, but this whole album actually is oddly ear-cloying, which is not surprising for a guy who made his living in the Brill Building with Don Kirshner. Listen, don't hate him because he's sexy. Up next, Supertramp, Crime of the Century. This is a retake. I originally said Supercramp, which, if you ask me, is a better name. This album is revered by the prog rock and classic rock vinyl community, but it will still probably surprise you to find it in the collection of me, Mr. Bad Brains Are the Greatest Band on Earth. You probably already know the song Dreamer, which was used in a commercial several years back, but the track that really gets me on this album is Bloody Well Right. To me, it's every bit as dynamic and infectious as anything off Pink Floyd's The Wall, and Side 2's Crime of the Century is the perfect way to end this unassuming masterpiece of an album. Oh, I got levels to me. There's no easy segue into this. Christopher Cross, this 1979 album I first experienced because it was bought by my eldest sister. She loved this album, and I had to hear it 24/7, to the point where I wanted to kill her, as well as hunt down and kill Mr. Cross himself. However, with the benefit of hindsight, and being that I hadn't listened to this album in decades, I picked it up in the bargain bin and fell in love with it. I Really Don't Know Anymore, Never Be the Same, Sailing, Ride Like the Wind, The Light Is On. There's a reason this guy walked away with every Grammy ever made. Listen, I live in Manhattan, I have a lot of stresses in my life, and sometimes I want to escape, and sailing sounds like the way to do that. My comedy partner and I wrote a sketch once about Christopher Cross doing a Broadway show with Billy Ocean, and it was called Crossing the Ocean. Until our joke actually becomes a reality, and the way Broadway is going, I think that will eventually happen for real. I'm gonna have to satisfy myself with escaping into this album. But listen, this is a warm foot massage of an album, with no tickling. Up next, Olivia Newton-John, If You Love Me, Let Me Know. I love you. I fell in love with Olivia as a 7-year-old brought to see Grease in the theater with my family. I was like, wow, look at how pretty that dreamy high schooler is. At the time of Grease, she was about 30. Anyway, this catches Olivia about 4 years before the movie Grease. And she is more of a countrified singer-songwriter, more in the vein of Canadian songstress Anne Murray. There is a gorgeous cover of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys on here that I really like a lot. But the heavy hitter, if you can call it that, off this album is the Peter Allen, Jeff Barry penned I Honestly Love You. Her voice was absolutely gorgeous back then, and it is just one sweet-sounding song after another. What's the matter? Have you never been mellow? Incidentally, there's a song on here, Mary Skeffington, that Olivia covers, which was written by Jerry Rafferty. And I love the Jerry Rafferty album, City to City. Yes, this is the album that houses Baker Street, which features, for my money, the greatest sax solo on any rock song. Dude, do you hear all those comments being typed? But it's followed by the track Right Down the Line, one of the coolest low-key love songs ever composed. The arc, Stealin' Time, Waiting for the Day, this whole album is brilliantly written and performed, and it especially goes down well after a tough day. Did someone say tough day music? You have guilty pleasures too, but I have nothing to be guilty of. Our love can climb any mountain, near or far, alright? So just watch your ass. I am a big fan of the albums that Barry Gibb, and sometimes Robin and Maurice, made down in Miami with his house producers. This is one of them. Barbara, Miss Streisand if you're nasty, asked Barry to produce her album because she was a big fan of the sound he was getting on Bee Gees albums. And the result, I think, is her best album. But anyway, as a kid, the lead track Guilty and the track A Woman in Love, I adored. I mostly heard these songs while helping my mother shop in the supermarket, but don't let that fool you. It goes down just as easy at home. While we're in this vein, don't at me, but Shadow Dancin' by the youngest Gibb brother is one of my favorite songs of the 70s. Barry Gibb not only produced this album, but also its predecessor, Flowing Rivers, which features the excellent track, I Just Want to Be Your Everything. Look, you don't have to follow me down the Sean Cassidy rabbit hole, but you should at least know that Andy Gibb had the goods, and that any Barry Gibb produced albums of the 70s that didn't get blown up in a baseball stadium are worth exploring. For the rest of this week's episode, please join my Patreon at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard, or click above for more free content.